Alright, I guess I'm live. Alright, greetings everyone. This is my second live stream in English for today. Hopefully the last one. I just want to share a couple of thoughts, observations from Psalm 110. Gospel gleanings or gospel nuggets or gospel truths that I find comforting in studying the book of Psalms, in particular Psalm 110. This psalm is most quoted in the New Testament, and this phrase, the Lord said, unto my Lord sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool, is quoted numerous times, about 7 times in point of fact, in the New Testament writings. And the truths of the priest who's made one forever after the order of Melchizedek. So it's a pretty gospel-filled psalm, even on the surface. I mean, all the psalms speak of Christ and Him crucified, but this psalm is just so explicitly so. I wanted to share with you a couple of thoughts on the very end of this psalm, where it says that verse 6 of this psalm says, "He shall judge among the heathen. He shall fill the places with the dead bodies. He shall wound the heads over many countries." And then the verse 7, "He shall drink of the brook in the way. Therefore shall he lift up the head." This is the end of Psalm 110. Now, it says that He'll judge among the heathen. He'll fill the places with the dead bodies or carcasses. And then He shall wound the heads over many countries. In our Russian translation, the noun heads is actually in the singular. So He shall crush the head in a broad place or country. And it's interesting that at least two little translations render that head in singular, so that it's Young's Little Translation says that He doth judge among the nations. He hath completed the carcasses, hath smitten the head over the mighty earth. So the head is in singular, which the Messiah, Christ, shall smite, or it says, hath smitten the head over the mighty earth. And so does the living, no, I guess it was, okay, so I was wrong. I thought that Green's Little Translation also had singular, so it's actually Young's Little Translation has the singular. So does our Russian Bible, the main translation. So the reference, of course, it sends you back to the proto-gospel promise that He shall crush the serpent in the head. So I believe this reference of the head has that connection to the proto-evangelical promise that Christ shall bruise or crush the head of the serpent, i.e. the devil, dragon. By His death on the cross, He crushed the head of that old serpent, the dragon, the devil. And the very last verse, the next one, and that makes sense in the context of this evangelical psalm. It's all about Christ. It's all about His work, His resurrection, and the day of His power as He's raised from the dead, and the sending of the rod of the power. Rule thou in the midst of thy enemies, and then thy people shall be made willing in the day of thy power. Of course, it's His resurrection. And the consequence of this is, of course, our quickening by the same power with which He Himself was raised from the dead. It is the same mighty power that is at work in us, both to will and to do His good pleasure, and first of all, to believe on this risen Christ. So it's all about Christ, and then the Lord has sworn, and shall not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And then the Lord at thy right hand shall strike through kings in the day of His wrath. And then He will judge among the heathen. He shall fill the place with the dead bodies. He shall wound the heads, says the King James. But it's very probable that it's just one head that it's going to be crushed through, His work, and the head of that old serpent. And then the very next and last verse in this psalm says, He shall drink of the brook in the way, therefore shall he lift up the head. And this the verse that I want to tell him more about, and labor some points in that verse. It says, He shall drink of the brook in the way, therefore he shall he lift up the head. What is this brook? What does that have to do with the rest of the psalm? And commentators, the Bible commentators, split over what it means. Some, and a majority probably, take it to mean that it's basically just by way of refreshing himself. Remember Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings, so he needed some refreshment. So he shall drink of the brook in the way, to refresh himself, to restore his strength, as it were, and then proceed. And therefore shall he lift up the head. But some take him to mean that the psalmist in this verse, that it actually refers to Christ drinking of the cup that he drinks from the brook in the way is referring to the cup of wrath and condemnation and indignation which he took from the hand of the Lord to drink in behalf of His people. He took this cup. Remember that, may this cup pass from me, if it be thy will, but yet not my will, but thine be done. It behooved Him to suffer, to drink from this cup. The cup of salvation which we take was the cup of damnation for Christ. He had to drink this cup so that we don't have to drink it. We drink the cup of salvation, but His was a cup of damnation. Again, the picture of this wrath of God, which He tasted for us in our behalf and in our stead, that we never experience drinking of that bitter cup of God's holy wrath and indignation. Okay? And I personally fall into the second category of commentators who believe that this reference, He shall drink of the brook in the way, it refers to His drinking of that, even though it doesn't say a cup. The connection that I make is with the book of Revelation, chapter 12. If you go to Revelation 12, it talks about the dragon and the woman at the end of the chapter. And the woman, of course, refers to the fullness of the church. In fact, at the beginning, it talks about the woman who is in pains, kind of pregnant. And it's not a single woman. It's not Mary, as Roman Catholics suppose. It's actually the church in the wilderness, church of the old dispensation, the old covenant church, which was expecting the Messiah to come, the promised seed of the woman, the seed of Abraham, the seed of David. So it is that woman, okay, in Revelation 12. And then the man-child, it was taken up. It's about Jesus. But since the book of Revelation is structured not as a sequential development, not in a chronological order, I don't believe so. I believe in the symbolic and spiritual significance of all of these visions that were given to the old John on the island of Patmos. So this revelation of Jesus Christ, and one of those revelations was to give this picture of the woman and the dragon who is after this woman. And it's interesting that in verse 15 of Revelation 12, it says, "And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood," or with the flood. So the picture is this serpent, this old dragon, is after the woman, which is the church. He's after the church to destroy it from the face of the earth. And the serpent casts out of his mouth water, it says, as a flood, that he might cause it to be carried away with a flood. Well, the picture is the flood of condemnation. Okay? The serpent, the accuser of the brethren, he accuses the brethren day and night. So this flood of water is representative of his accusations. His accusations, bringing charges against God's elect. Remember, Romans 8 talks about who shall bring charge against God's elect. Well, in point of fact, Satan does that all the time, but he cannot prevail, even though the accusations are real, inasmuch as they are true, at least to facts. I mean, we do sin. So when Satan accuses us before the Father, he brings up real stuff against us. Okay? Otherwise, there'd be no point of him to accuse him of imaginary things. There are real sins that we do commit against God's holiness and justice and love and so forth. Brings our real debts before the presence of God. But we have the advocate with the Father, the righteous one, who says, "The Lord rebuke you, Satan," because Jerusalem is a brand plucked out of fire. So we are covered with Christ's blood. He pleads it, and therefore the accusations of Satan cannot prevail. They will not have success. Okay, precisely because Christ is interceding in our behalf. Now we understand all that. So I take this flood, this torrent, to mean it's correspondent with the language of Psalm 110, that this brook is also a torrent of water. And it's not just a peaceful brook. It is thus this torrent which in my opinion, represents this flood of water which was cast from the mouth of that Satan, of the dragon, which is after us to consume us, to cause her, church, to be carried away with it. Okay? So Christ drinks from that brook, from that torrent, from that flood. He consumes it. Now, here in Revelation 12, we have the next verse says that, "And the earth held the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon." So here it is the earth which opens its mouth to swallow it up. But we know that the book of Revelation is full of images representing spiritual things, spiritual realities. I believe that it is kind of metaphorically speaking again, that since Christ's death made him or caused him to be for a short while in the deepest parts of the earth. Remember the son of Jonah, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so is Christ. "Out of the depths have I cried unto thee." He's also in the midst or in depths of the earth. That represents his sufferings. which placed him in the deepest parts of the earth. That's representative of his vicarious sin bearing, his damnation. When he's on the cross, he is in the deepest hell, as it were. Okay? So the earth helped the woman and opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood. It speaks of Christ's sufferings, which make it possible for the earth, as it were, to receive that flood and to consume it. Okay? Because Christ first went there, he underwent that damnation, and therefore that water, that flood of condemnation from the accuser of the brethren is removed. Okay, it's consumed by the earth, swallowed up by it, so that it cannot hurt that woman, which is the church in the wilderness. Okay, read again Revelation 12. The church is clearly it's the church. I mean, undoubtedly, and the seed of the church and the male child and so forth. So Christ drinks from that brook in the way it says, and so therefore shall he lift up his head, it says. So there I see the connection, because otherwise, see, the lifting up his head is also significant because it refers to his exaltation subsequent to his humiliation and sufferings. Again, let me read to you from Psalm 110. He shall drink of the brook in the way, therefore shall he lift up the hand. See, it was just drinking for refreshment purposes, to relieve himself, to get some fresh water. Then why is there this connection? Therefore shall he lift up the head. And it's not just being relieved. I believe there's a connection with some New Testament verses which speak of Christ being highly exalted because of the sufferings. And his sufferings here in this latter part of Psalm 110 are represented by his drinking of that brook, which is also that flood of water from the mouth of that dragon. Okay, the city difference. This is how I interpret it, you know, and just a thought to share with you guys. Hopefully, it'll bring some gospel comfort, knowing that Christ did everything that was to be done to liberate us, to free us, to deliver us from that flood of condemnation from the mouth of the dragon. He drank it in our behalf, and so shall he lift up his head, and therefore God hath exalted him and given him the name above every name, not only named in this age, but in the age to come, because he underwent so great a work of suffering, vicarious suffering in our behalf, to free us from that condemnation from Satan. Okay, this simple gospel thought, I call them kind of gospel nuggets that I like, I like to find, and especially in the Psalter, in the book of Psalms, with the purpose of encouraging God's people, whithersoever you are, so that you may be encouraged by these gospel truths in your daily walk, that Christ did drink of that cup and of that brook, and therefore we don't have to drink it. We're freed. And this is the gospel of our salvation, of our deliverance from guilt, sin, death, condemnation, and hell. We're freed because Christ drank from it. All right? Okay, that's it for today. May God bless you all. Bye-bye.